A few years ago, I was at my desk in my apartment. It wasn't unusually late, but it was fairly quiet for a weeknight. I was just waking up from an after-work nap. I'm a night person, so I usually stay up late, sleep a little, head to work, come home, and then nap to make up the difference. I wake up and I start my computer and my PlayStation. From there, I yawn and shamble my groggy self into the main living area. I headed to the fridge in search of something to eat. I hadn't eaten since late night, early morning the day previous. Just like my sleeping habits, my eating patterns are poorly maintained. I think it was an Asian market prepackaged ramen that I ate. Perhaps I just drunk a beer, or maybe it was a couple sips of milk that settled my stomach. I made it back to my room regardless. My intent was to surf the internet, binge a few video games, like I do every night. I get situated in the most comfortable eating position, and I looked for a video to put on. It wasn't but a few moments before I saw my phone light up. It was a notification. I had received a voicemail. I usually block unknown numbers, and I asked to leave a voicemail if you want to be called back. I unlocked my phone to listen. I had put it on speaker, but it was very hard to hear, and I could barely make out anything. So I picked it up, kept it on speaker, and tried to see if there was anything audible. It was hard to make out, but eventually I had listened to it enough times. It was an older man's voice. It was low and sounded like a dry, gravel-filled cement mixer. He had just 3 short statements that he made.
Maybe I'll call again. Maybe next time you'll pick up. Next time I talk, you listen.
I listened to that message a few more times. It wasn't anyone I recognized. Most people, I assume they dial the wrong number. I don't pay them any mind and I just delete the messages, deeming them not important. I went on to do so, but I stopped here. I was thinking, what a strange thing to leave someone. This 12 seconds of a message. And it's not any message that would invite a constructive conversation. Something had piqued my interest, and I did something I'd never done before. I called that number back. It was just one of those things that hits your processing centers. So stupid and insignificant to pay attention to, but impossible for the same reason to ignore. So the phone rang a while. I got to about the 6th ring before I decided to hang up. Figured he wouldn't answer at all. But on the 7th, he picked up. I asked the gentleman, I said, "Hey, I was just left a message from this number." He spoke low and confused. Did I? Let me see. He started to, what I assume, check the number he tried to call. I did. Sorry about that. I told him that it wasn't a problem. He responded saying that he was trying to reach his daughter, Madeline. "No worries, it happens," I said. He bid me a good night, but I stopped him. He hung in silence for a beat, and I asked him if everything was all right. I could tell he was shocked. He affirmed, albeit hesitantly, that everything was indeed okay. It was very forward of me, but I listened to the message. He sighed heavily, a pregnant pause. I could feel that he was working out to say something. In the silence, I began to think, this is a very weird thing I'm doing. This is a very zero-sum whim that I'm following on. I didn't know him, nor he me. So why did I do it? But I also began to think that it was stranger that he was still on the line. 100 different responses, but he didn't do anything that I figured. He just sat there in silence. I assumed he grew the same inclination that I had towards him. Too good to pass up the interaction. He finally broke the silence. "We haven't spoken in a while." I inquired, gaining an increasing notion to push and pry, that it sounded more than not speaking. You ever hear someone furrow their brow? Because I'm sure that's what I heard over the phone. It may not have actually happened, but I could feel the wheels turning in his mind. He responded with a tale. He wanted to tell me about himself for some reason. He spoke about growing up. He had a small family, just him and a brother. He was poor and joined the military. Wasn't very skilled, so he thought doing something good for the country, and maybe he might see the world. He left a girlfriend behind to wait for him. talked about him being an average soldier, no real accomplishments, a veteran of the Vietnam War in name only. He continued on about places he had been, and he always liked visiting Europe. He wanted to live there. I interjected with a question on why Europe. He liked the buildings, he said. Cozy. He skipped through large chunks of his story about coming back home and what he did for work. He said, I don't work anymore, so why does it matter what I did? He finally stopped on his daughter. All the life that life could be. That's how he described her. We would just sit and look at each other at sometimes. She was quiet, just like me. To be honest, I started to half listen. I didn't feel like my interest was being rewarded. A generic story of hard life and fights between children and their parents, sure. He moved to something run-of-the-mill, a teenager versus parent argument, then said, how do you feel about it? Startled me to focus. I smoothly asked, what specifically? Concealing my inattentiveness, though I think he caught on, doesn't matter really. I stand by what I said. She's always been stupid. Finally, I had a reaction. Something about that sentence really twisted me inside. The most I ever wanted from my parents was for them to back off. 28 and they still have to go through the same conversations with me. He tried to shoot back some nonsense about not doing the same things over and over again. I told him, we all create the monsters we seek to destroy, whether inside ourselves or in someone else. And then he thought for a long time, making audible groans and shifting the phone. After a while, he spoke slow and deliberately. You have a stupid head on your shoulders, too. I've been known to have stupid ideas, I retorted. Without missing a beat, you know next to nothing. But I think all that stupid makes sense. I had no words. I choked up a bit. Possibly words I've been waiting to hear. From my own parents, of course, but this was as close as I was going to get. Makes sense. He finished by telling me that sometimes you have to give a lot more to get the amount of take you want. And then he hung up. No name exchanges, no pleasantries, no real sustained clashing of our ideals. Just two people who said their piece. I hung in that moment for a while. I imagine he did too. And I felt unsatisfied. I never really took his words to heart, but I also never forgot them. I don't know if I'll ever need those words. I hope they make a difference if I do.